So, the news story today, Biden administration will make it easier for student loan borrowers to get a mortgage, by Adam S. Minsky, who's a senior contributor at Forbes magazine. Um, Before I even get started, I'll just say it just like this. I already knew that the government was going to be forced in order to make changes to the system. And I knew that for a very long time, and I know I've mentioned it in a number of my videos when I talk about, because you got to remember, I've made videos talking about how to pay your student loans off better and how to consolidate them. And I also explained to you about the Loan You Later app that allows you to calculate student loans. Now, the reason why I knew that something was going to have to be done is because there was an act. It'll come back to me. All of a sudden I went blind on it, but I know it in the back of my mind, which had to do with the debt to income ratio. Now, the way the debt to income ratio works is that banks basically don't want to give you certain types of loans if you have more debt than you have income to pay it. So basically, the debt to income ratio takes your debt and divides it by your income. And if you are spending more than 50% of your monthly income, that's kind of a red flag. They really want you spending less than 50% of your income. So, for example, I have two houses. One of my houses, for example, cost, what is it? About give or take $2,000 per month when I had a mortgage for it, right? So when I actually bought that house, they take a look at your income and they said, oh, you make $6,000 a month, right? And if you make $6,000 a month, then that means that this $2,000 per month that's costing you for your house and your taxes, that's less than 50% of your income. So the debt to income ratio, as long as you're spending less than 50% of your income, it makes it easier to get a loan. So what they ultimately did was they created regulations during, I believe it was 2009, after we went through the bailout of 2008 under the Bush presidency. During the Obama guidelines that they put forward, what they did was they changed it so that they said, listen, if your debt to income ratio is edging closer and closer to 50%, yeah, you're not being able to buy a mortgage. So when you fast forward from 2009, 2010, when you fast forward all the way up until now to 2020, 2011, I already knew that they were going to have to do something about this, because the reality is this is really a racial issue. You may hear them say a lot of things about African Americans and possibly even Hispanics not being able to purchase homes, and there being discrimination towards blacks and Hispanics. The reality is that as a black man, I can say that they like to put the black face on every single problem, when in reality it's white liberals that want these things passed, and they need to put my face on it in order to make it appear that there's a racial disparity and there's, whatever, racism, racial disparity. And the reality is black liberals buy this shit up. Now, there's two different types of black liberals. There's the working poor, and then there's the wealthy. The wealthy ones were the smart ones that used what's called subsidy capture in order to get as much as they can out of these poorly implemented government programs. Now, it may sound like I'm bashing Biden. I'm not bashing Biden. I already knew that these things were coming. I'm really not bashing Biden because he is being forced to do this stuff by the liberals who are controlling him. So I already knew. Let me tell you something. I've said this in other videos. I'm not taking sides on this. I already knew that the government had to act. It's just like with the welfare checks that they printed out during COVID. The government basically said, you know what, we've got two choices. We can either put armed soldiers out on the streets with live ammo and tell you motherfuckers, you better stay in your fucking house, and if you come out here and you start rioting, we're going to blow you away. Yeah, that was one option. The other option was, yeah, what we can do is we can print lots of welfare checks and we can give them the opportunity to buy cryptocurrency and put those welfare checks to use. So ultimately, the government chose the latter. Instead, most other countries that have balls, they would have, chosen the former. But they're not going to do that here, or at least not yet. So in any event, I'm not blaming Biden. He's doing what they're forcing him to do. The majority of this country, the whites who are getting married, the white liberals, even the white conservatives, those kids are deep in debt because they decided to go to party schools. They wasted a lot of time, wasted a lot of money, and now they found themselves basically in debt for the rest of their natural lives. Meanwhile, compare that with me. I went to school. I signed up for government loans. I signed a promissory note that says, yes, I will get the job. I will pay them back no matter what. I got my job. I started paying those loans back. I got a second job. I paid even more money to those loans, and I got those loans knocked out before their interest could really affect me. So we can see who's more of a fiscal conservative here. Those Republicans that talk all that shit about being fiscally conservative. Yeah, well, I'm really what they're not. So I'm more of one than they are. But anyway, the Biden administration is easing federal mortgage lending rules to give student loan borrowers a better shot at being approved for a home mortgage. Now, we've also, as in my other stories, I was talking about it before a lot of these big YouTube guru fakes were talking about it. And I was talking about the fact that corporations and foreign money, specifically money coming from China, Russia, Israel, India, and a number of other places in Southeast Asia, that they were buying up all of our properties. They were buying our houses. They were buying our businesses that had gone defunct in certain areas, specifically in New York City, specifically inside the big cities. And now there's a reason why they're doing it in the big cities. They could be doing this in a lot of areas in the outskirts. Like, for instance, I live in New York City, and I also have a house in Long Island. Now, in Long Island, there's a number of businesses that have gone bankrupt, and there's a number of office buildings and whatnot that have shuttered. A lot of signs on these places that say, yeah, this place is for lease, blah, blah, blah. The issue is these corporations, these foreigners, these conglomerates, what they're doing is they see that the interest rates are lower than ever. So if they buy a property now, they can hold that property for 15 years, for 30 years, maybe indefinitely. They'll probably never sell those properties. So when they're saying great reset, they're talking about the fact that wealth right now is being redistributed. And that's just what it is. They said the Federal Housing Administration changes to its student loan calculations that should make it easier for student loan borrowers to approve a mortgage. First of all, if you have student loans, you should not be buying a mortgage. If you have student loans, you really should be paying off those student loans before you get a mortgage. I'll say it like this. When you get a mortgage, your mortgage application goes through a process called underwriting where they go over your background with a fine-tooth comb. If you have credit card debt, you really should be getting rid of that credit card debt before you apply for a mortgage. If you have student loans, you should be getting rid of those student loans before you apply for a mortgage. Why? Well, it's really simple. You have your assets, you have your liabilities. Chances are you have almost no assets whatsoever, and you're all liability, especially if you're holding student loans or you're holding credit card debt. So in order to make sure your debt to income ratio is as low as possible, you have to pay off as many liabilities as possible before you try to get a larger loan. If you try to get larger loans before those debts are paid off, number one, they're going to charge you more interest because you're a higher risk and also because they can. And number two, they may just flat out deny you because they'll say, yeah, well, you're holding too much debt. How the fuck, if you make $3,000 a month, how are you going to pay a $2,000 a month mortgage and still be able to eat and still be able to have a car to get back and forth to work and still be able to buy clothes? That's how the bank thinks. I personally think like a bank. Every decision that I make is an investment. A good bank is, they have a fiduciary responsibility to not give you a loan that you can't afford. Now, we flexed the word quote unquote afford a lot in the last couple of years. Americans think they can afford everything because they got credit cards. Credit cards are not income. Credit cards are debt. They are borrowing. They are assets. They are assets if you use them right, but they're liabilities. They are absolute liabilities if you use them wrong. And I'll give you an example because and there's a bunch of fake gurus on YouTube who constantly down talk credit cards. Dave Ramsey, I'm going to call him David. Dave Ramsey is not a good YouTube guru. He's a debt shamer. There are some people who that's their business is debt shaming. I use my credit card for all of my purchases. The difference, however, between me and most Americans is that, as I've told you 100 times in my videos about credit card debt, the difference is that I pay off my balance every single night. And it's funny because there's some people have told me, oh, you don't have to pay it off every single night. You can wait a couple of days or you can wait till the end of the month. Yes, you are right. However, on the off chance that I might make a mistake and not be able to pay the full bill, I don't wait. If I buy something, if I go to Costco and I buy an air conditioner for $300 on my credit card, I'm going to get some points and some reward fees for it. I pay no fees. I pay no annual fee, no nothing. But as time goes on and I rack up those points, I'm getting a small amount of money back for all my expenses. The people who don't pay their credit cards on time are the ones who are subsidizing my rewards and subsidizing my frequent flyer miles. So I'll say it like this. When these fake gurus, because most of these motherfuckers don't travel, they sit right in their little cell or their little basement or their little fucking house, and they stay here in America where they're safe. Meanwhile, I'm flying all over the fucking world. I'm eating sushi in the backwoods of Japan. I'm in South Korea in Seoul Tower looking out. But y'all are listen, you do what you want to do. Bottom line is, when I'm able to finance business class to Emirates Dubai, or when I'm able to finance a trip to Maldives or Seychelles, you're sitting right there in your little trailer park or your little bubble, debt shaming people. So if that's what you want to do, that's fantastic. I don't give a fuck. But I will say this. If you use a credit card right, a credit card is an asset. Furthermore, there are some jobs that require a credit check. If you don't build your credit, you may have problems applying for certain jobs. That's one of the best ways that I can debunk the credit shamers because, oh yeah, you don't need credit. These are the same motherfuckers that ain't got nothing. Have you ever gone out with somebody who's trying to shop for something and they don't have credit? They give you worse treatment than if you had bad credit. If you have no credit, you have nothing. So these people, oh yeah, credit card's just a game, Well, you keep fucking thinking that, and you keep having absolutely nothing. A credit card it's kind of like a gun. It's a tool. If you use it right, it is an asset. If you use it wrong, it's a liability. Most of these people have these negative feelings because they fucked up and they used it wrong, and it probably bankrupted them. Dave Ramsey has filed bankruptcy. I've never filed bankruptcy. Maybe it's because I learned everything about finances in banking and mortgage lending as a mortgage lender and a banker. Maybe that's just me. But some of these people who talk the most shit are the ones that have filed bankruptcy. So my thing is, I don't even bother with them. But anyway, it says the policy change centers on the removal of the current requirement that FHA mortgage lenders calculate a borrower's monthly student loan payment as 1% of their outstanding student loan balance for loans that are not fully amortizing or in repayment. Amortization basically means that there is a schedule, and over the time that you're paying a loan, you go from paying mostly interest and less principal to paying mostly principal and less interest. So if you have a loan on a house, you start out by paying interest up front, and as time goes on, you pay less and less interest, but you pay more and more principal. By the time you hit the final payment on that house 30 years from now, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, whatever your mortgage is, you will have paid 100% principal and you'd have paid 100% interest. The only way to beat the amortization schedule is to suddenly come into a lot of cash money and then take that and pay towards the principal. Or you can increase your monthly payments so that you're paying more towards the principal instead of paying more towards the interest. But different people have different ways of working it out. That's the reason why I told you about the Loan You Later calculator, because the Loan You Later calculator has an amortization schedule where if you get a car loan, a student loan, a home loan, you can see what the schedule will look like for that loan. And for the most part, it's very accurate. So it says this includes borrowers who are in an approved deferment or forbearance or who are only required to make relatively small payments under an income-based repayment plan. So let's say this is what's happening right now. What they're trying to do is they're trying to stretch your loans out longer. That's what they're trying to do. Now, for instance, if I wanted a Bugatti Chiron is a $3 million car. But if I was able to stretch that loan out to 1 billion years, oh yeah, it would only cost me maybe $1 or $2 a day. But that we all know that's not realistic. It's not going to happen because they know I ain't going to be alive 1 billion years from now. But anyway, for example, a federal student loan borrower with $100,000 of outstanding balance, an income of $60,000 a year, and now here's my question. With the exception of somebody who's actually been working for at least 2 or 3 years, what student do you know who graduates school and is making $60,000 a year? Furthermore, if you're making $60,000 a year, how the fuck are you affording a house? And by the way, notice that it says and a family size of 3. So let me get this straight. You've graduated school, you're making $60,000 a year, and you already started having kids? Yeah, that doesn't sound right at all. Vast majority of people who are graduating college right now, they're waiting until their late 30s to start having children. Okay, let's keep going. It says may only have a monthly payment of $245 per month under approved income-driven repayment plans. But an FSA-backed mortgage lender may assume that the borrower actually has a payment of $1,000 a month. Yeah, that's because they're supposed to have an $1,000 per month payment. If you borrow $60,000 or $70,000 worth of student, and by the way, notice in this problem, they didn't say how much student loan you have. So these people at Forbes, yeah, listen, I know you work at Forbes, and I know you want to pass yourselves off as really, really good business journalists. But what you didn't do was you didn't say how much of a student loan borrowing do you have. Like, for instance, some people may only have $30,000 of student loans. Some people might have 60. Some people might have 90,000. If the bank looks at your overall credit report and they say, wait a minute, this guy's got $100,000 worth of student loans and he only makes $60,000 per year and he wants to buy a house that's $300,000. Do you think they're going to approve you for that loan? The answer is probably no. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to force the bank's hand. Again, didn't they get enough of this during the Bush presidency? In 2001, and I know the Republicans and the Trump dick suckers, I know they don't like me talking about it, but I don't really care. In 2001, Bush basically told the Federal Reserve to make it easier for people to get credit. So what did people do? They went out and bought boats, they bought home equity lines, they bought all types of credits that they would never be able to repay back. And sure enough, it all crashed in 2008, right before Bush stepped out of office. Now, I know a lot of these Republican losers and these assorted racists like to talk about Obama behind the bailout, but the reality is the Democrats held a supermajority in 2006 to 2008, so Nancy Pelosi was the face on that one. Bush was the face on that one. Obama came in 2009. Then they put together Obama's bailout package because they basically split it half and half. Then Trump came in, and then we had to do yet another bailout. And Trump signed off on it. Yeah, the Republicans say, yeah, he shouldn't have signed off on it. But at the end of the day, they're not real fiscal conservatives, so they signed off on it. And they aren't libertarians either. Libertarians might have had the balls, like, say, Ron Paul or Rand Paul or even Peter Schiff. They might have had the balls not to sign it, but the reality is the government say, we ain't got no choice but to sign it. So the bottom line is that's the real history of it. The government was told by George W. Bush, give them more credit in response to the 9/11 attacks to make sure that we could get out of recession by forcing people to buy on credit. Well, I have news for you. That does not get people out of recession when you're consuming on credit. It just doesn't. So anyway, it says this could prevent the borrower from getting a mortgage. Yeah, that's the whole point. You're supposed to prevent the borrower from getting a mortgage that they can't afford. The new FHA policy will allow mortgage lenders to use a borrower's actual monthly student loan payment amount, even if it is below the traditional 1% of the total balance. If a student loan borrower's calculated payment is zero, how do you have a student loan payment calculated at $0? Which is possible under an income-driven repayment plan. The mortgage lender will automatically apply 0.5% of the outstanding student loan balance as an assumed payment rather than 1%. Homeownership is okay. So this is where they get to the bullshit. I'll read that last one in a second. Um, Understand something. It's the bank's job not to give you loans that you can't afford. There's a reason why my credit is 850. Because they look over my credit report and they're like, wow, how the fuck did this black kid in New York City go from a 500 credit score graduating college, and how the fuck did he get to an 850? If any underwriter were to look over my credit, they'd be like, how the fuck did you do that? How did you afford 2 houses? How did you do that? How the fuck did you do that? How did you pay off these loans early? How did you do that? Okay, well, I guess you qualify for 850. So while the rest of you are running around lying and screaming racial discrimination, what you don't want to talk about is how you fucked up your credit by buying a Sprint cell phone or buying a Nextel Boost mobile phone and running up your credit and then not paying it back. What you don't want to talk about is how you signed a promissory note, you took out a loan, and then you didn't pay it back. When I signed first of all, the word mortgage means death pledge. If I pledge you to the death that I'm going to get something done, you goddamn better believe I'm going to get it done. But most of y'all out here capping. So it's easy for me, like you look at my videos, it's easy for me to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to walk into this dealership, I'm going to buy something, and I'm going to finance it, or I'm going to lease it, and I got an 850 credit score. It's easy for me to go to Staples and print out my payoff letters for my student loans, my payoff letters for my mortgage and shit. It's easy for me to do that because I keep my promise. If I make that kind of promise, oh, you best believe I'm going to keep it. And the banks are watching. They're watching. Your credit report is it's a behavior report. They are watching to see how do you behave with money. Now, I do think it's kind of odd that they're giving people lots and lots of credit and allowing people to act as if they are corporate CEOs in their house and they're balancing and leveraging debt and this that. I think that's kind of dangerous, honestly. However, when I look back over history, you have to remember the king had to write welfare checks too. The king had all that gold, he had all that money, but he knew that the people working for him, he knew that those serfs were right outside. And he knew that, you know what, wait a minute. If I don't give these people food and I don't give these people some type of welfare, these motherfuckers gonna run up in this castle and they gonna kill my ass. And there won't be enough knights at a round table to stop these motherfuckers from running up in here on me. Ask Louis the 16th. I constantly think back to Louis the 16th. That motherfucker got his head chopped off by parliamentary order. The people said, you know what? Fuck this motherfucker. We gonna kill his ass. A king is a king up until everybody decided to run up in that castle and chop his goddamn head off. So when you understand that, and then you look at January 6th, See, I don't think y'all understand what I'm talking about. See, that's the problem. Y'all don't know your history, and I don't even think you know your present. Louis the 16th, they charged this guy with treason, and they chopped his goddamn head off. Now, you fast forward to these Republicans who are upset about Trump on January 6th, and then they saw Mike Pence and they saw Mitch McConnell say, yeah, well, guess what? We're not going to stand in the way of the Electoral College. What did these Republican white conservatives do? What did they do? What did they do? They ran up into the castle after Louis the 16th. They say, hey, Mike Pence, we're going to hang you. They said, Nancy Pelosi, we're gonna hang you. They came in there with zip ties. They had guns on them. They took the policeman. They threw a fire extinguisher at the back of his head. You know what? The policeman was the knight of the round table. And they came up and bam, right with a fucking fire extinguisher right in the back of your motherfucking head. What was that guy's name? What was that cop's name that got killed like that? I think the other one got beat with a flagpole. You know, it's been a couple of months. It'll come back to me. I forget what his name was. Shit, what was that guy's name? Anyway, it doesn't matter now. But the point is, if you don't give these people a little bit of that gold and you don't give them a little bit of that silver, they will run up in that castle and they will cut your head off. They will run up in that Capitol building and they will hang Mike Pence. They will run up in that Capitol building and they will hang Nancy Pelosi. They will run up in that Capitol building and they will, who else would, they were trying to get Alexandria, that's my girl right there. They were trying to get Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They were trying to get Ilhan Omar. They were trying to get, who else? Tlaib. They were trying to get Representative Tlaib. They were going to run up in that castle and they were going to chop the king's head off. That's what they were doing. So when you look at the historical perspective, it makes sense. It all makes sense. So the king understood. He's like, yo, listen, I got to write these welfare checks because I ain't got no goddamn choice. I ain't got no choice because they will run up on me. So it says right here, home ownership is the cornerstone of the American dream and the best way to build generational wealth. Well, I've been saying that. If you buy a house and you pay that house off, first of all, I'm going to say this again. Because I want to repeat this until people understand it. A 30-year fixed mortgage is built on the logic that you're going to get married in your 20s, that you're going to live in that house, stay married, and pay on that house until your 50s. And by your 50s, you're going to be old and you're going to be retired. By the time your mortgage is paid off, assuming you don't modify it, that you're going to be able to have that house as an asset rather than a liability. You will be able to use that house if you need it to sell it and then move to Florida or whatever. Or you will use the supplemental income from Social Security, or you will use your pension and Social Security to keep yourself afloat. Too many people today are spending all their money using credit cards to live beyond their means. And then by the time they hit retirement, they realize, I don't have a pension and I may not have enough money in Social Security. So yeah, those welfare checks are being printed. Right now, the government is spending $65,000 per second. Actually, I think it's slightly more than that. The national debt is quickly approaching $30 trillion. When you do the math, and you find out that you have a $1.9 trillion budget and you do the math, it really does come out to $63,000 or $64,000 per second. It actually does. You can do the math. But that's the reality that we're facing. The majority of white kids in America are deep in debt. Their parents are deep in debt. They cannot afford to buy a house. Most of these houses also come with property taxes. The vast majority of white America cannot afford to buy a house or pay property taxes. So what is the media going to do about it? Well, they're going to paint it as a racist issue. They're going to paint it as African Americans and Hispanics can't buy houses. Now, meanwhile, most of us are not on track to getting married in our 20s. We are not on track to buying a house in our 20s. More whites actually are. I will say this, whites and Asians actually are on track to marrying in their 20s and buying a house on their 20s. The problem is, not with Asians, but with whites, the debt levels are so high. I knew Biden was going to have to address this because he had no choice. This country's intergenerational wealth is built on homeownership because it's the one asset that you have. It doesn't have to pay a dividend, but people need a roof over their head. I knew a long time ago that sooner or later the government was going to do something. So originally I thought that Biden was going to change the credit system. So right now I have, and I made a video about this before, I have an 850 credit score. And I figured he was going to try to get rid of the credit system as it is and try to get rid of the 3 credit bureaus in order to put together some bullshit government credit system that gives the people a credit score that they're happy with. And you got to understand, credit tracks your behavior. Most of these people who lie about racial discrimination have fucked up credit. And if you looked at their credit, you would understand what they're lying about. But they'll never show you their credit report, which I understand because there's a lot of scammers out there. You wouldn't want to give away identity theft. You wouldn't want to do that. But most of them, they went out and they bought their Gucci, they bought their Prada, they bought their Coach on their credit cards. They were paying it back real slow. They bought their Jordan sneakers. They bought their Mercedes, they used BMWs, they used Audis and try to pretend like they rich out on the street because hell, you can sleep in a car but you can't drag race a house, right? So they were buying all of this stuff. Some of these people went out and bought boats they couldn't afford. Some of these people, I mean, they were buying houses they couldn't afford. And when it all came due, now they want to scream that they're being discriminated against. That's what it is. Have you ever heard me scream about discrimination in the credit market? No, you haven't. You know why? You know why? Because when I walk in there with that 850 credit score, I can walk in there with my pants down and ain't nothing they can do about it. All they can say is, oh, well, it looks like he qualifies. That's it. That's it. So you ain't going to hear me crying poor mouth. You ain't going to hear me screaming and crying. You're not going to see me out there buying shit that I can't afford. You're not going to see that. If I buy something, you best believe I could afford it. Not only could I afford it, I could afford it twice. That's the mentality you need to have when you're wasting your money. That's the mentality. You know what? If I can't afford this, I shouldn't buy it. If I don't want to spend my money in this degree and I want to save my money, then I shouldn't buy something. If I want to take my money and invest it, I shouldn't buy this thing right here, whatever it is. I shouldn't buy this boat. I shouldn't buy this Prada. I shouldn't buy this Gucci. I shouldn't buy this Coach. But y'all ain't trying to hear none of that. Y'all want what y'all want. Y'all want it now. So, be that as it may, you'll hear a lot of people complaining. But you're not going to hear me complaining. You don't hear me complaining about going out and getting a useless liberal arts degree that I can't get a job in. You're not going to hear me complaining about that because I didn't do it. But all these people are taking women's studies. The people who are taking liturgical dance and trying to get a PhD in it. The people who are taking, animal husbandry and you don't live anywhere near a farm. Those are the people you're going to hear complaining. Those are the people that if they vote in large enough numbers for the Democrats, those are the people. And the Democrats, listen, that's their job. They're going to use these people's votes. And these people are going to complain. And Democrats are going to say, okay, well, if you vote for me, I'll get you that welfare check. That's what the reality of America in 2021 is. This country is going to be more socialist than China. This country is going to be more socialist than the Soviet Union ever thought that it could be. And it collapsed, by the way. But this country is going that route. And this has nothing to do, and I know a lot of you want to say, oh, yeah, you see, it's the Democrats. No, it's not. The Republican conservatives, I'll tell you what, every Republican conservative, out of all of them who got them Trump welfare checks, who got those Biden welfare checks, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to find out just how many of them took those checks and mailed them back to the federal government. Not a goddamn one of them. Not a goddamn one of them. Now me, I make too much money. I didn't get any Biden welfare checks. I didn't get any Trump welfare checks. The only time I ever got one of those stim checks was from George W. Bush, because back then I was still in college, so I was going to end up getting it anyway. But guess what? That's the reality. So what's this person? Development Secretary Marcia L. Fudge. Her name is Fudge. I like that. Her name is Marcia L. Fudge, like E.L. Fudge. In a statement, she says, yes, I am proud that FHA is taking action to make it easier for borrowers with student loan debt to qualify for a federally insured mortgage. Well, I bet if I were to look back, I could find somebody who was saying, yes, I'm very proud that President Bush and Alan Greenspan are making it easier for people to get the boats and the Prada and the Gucci and the Coach bags and the Air Jordan sneakers. And when this economy collapses in 2008, I don't know who the president will be then, but we'll just blame it on him.